I'm Christie Bilbrey. After working in a Senate press office, the White House, several years in corporate, I decided to start my own business and realized that none of my experiences taught me how to market myself. Thankfully, I discovered that strategy and brand storytelling made it easy for me to connect with my audience, promote my services, and grow my brand. I created the Business That Story Built podcast to help business leaders strengthen the stories we tell ourselves and those we tell others. Now, let's take your mindset and messaging to the next level. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm really excited to be in this personal branding series with a really cool guest who I know you guys are going to really appreciate his perspective. And we're going to cover something that a lot of people ask me about, and I know they think about, and that has to do with why it's important for introverts, as well as other types that he's going to get into. It's going to be really cool. So let me tell you a little bit about who we are talking to today. We have Alejandro Sanoja, and he is an award-winning MBA. He has been named one of 6 personal branding experts to follow and is a guest lecturer at the Cougar Investment Fund, where he coaches stock analysts and portfolio managers on their presentation skills. He helps accomplished professionals communicate their value and expertise with confidence to elevate their professional profile and attract growth opportunities. So Alejandro, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about the conversation that we're going to have, and I'm looking forward to sharing some either strategic or tactical insights that can help the audience get to the next level.
Yeah, and you have a really cool background. So I'd love if you'd just take a minute and kind of share a little bit of your story and your background that brought you into personal branding.
Absolutely. Well, when I arrived in the United States, I certainly did not fit the mold of what America would consider a good professional. I struggled in high school. I was always a below average GPA student. In undergrad, I dropped out for a few years. I never participated in any kind of like leadership activities or clubs or extracurricular activities. And then I arrived in the US, not necessarily because I've always thought about doing a graduate program, but because I was kind of like escaping what was going on there in Venezuela. For context, the highlights, well, I don't know if we should call them the highlights, maybe the lowlights, but the big numbers of what's going on there. In the past decade, we've had 1,000,000% inflation some years.
Wow.
So imagine we struggle. Like we've been struggling here in the US with low double digits, right? And everybody's feeling it. Imagine 1,000,000%. It's basically every second you're in the grocery store, when you grab the product, it's one price. And when you get to the register to pay, it's already a higher price.
Wow.
Because every second prices are going up. And the second number is we've had GDP drops of more than 30%. And no economist can explain it because it's usually a natural disaster or a war that causes that. That was not the case in Venezuela. And when the report came out 6 to 8 years ago, it was 20% of the population. I believe now it's up to 30% of the population that has left the country. So it's the biggest refugee crisis in our continent. So definitely because of all of that, I was looking for opportunities outside of Venezuela. That's where graduate school came in. And my plan was, okay, I'm really good at numbers. I'm going to focus on the hard skills. I'm going to do finance. I'm going to get good grades. Now I'm going to get an awesome job, build a career here in the US. Great. And then in the first week in the program, you learn that you have to work on your soft skills. And I don't know whether they're called soft skills because they're actually probably more important than your hard skills in most professional settings. So then I started doing the opposite, like jumping all in on leadership opportunities, clubs, panels, guest lectures, any opportunity to present. I started doing improv comedy. I joined Toastmasters. I started going to 2 to 3 networking events every week. So I went from, I think, 200 contacts on LinkedIn when I arrived in the US to 2,000 after those 2 years of the MBA program. So I definitely was working my extrovert muscles. And then I just started keep doing the same, building the business and just getting to know people, chambers of commerce, anything and everything to get my name out there. But then at some point I was exhausted as an introvert. I think people confuse introversion and extroversion as being shy, and that's not it at all. It just means where you get your energy from. So extroverts recharge when they go out there and are with people and meeting and having small talk and conversations, versus for introverts, that's a lot of work. So then we need to kind of like retreat to our own little cave and recharge. So I was exhausted after those 2 to 3 years of like MBA and then building the business. I thought, well, there has to be something else that introverts can leverage to get to the next level. And it reminded me of the story of kind of like David and Goliath, where David did not say, hey, I'll take that giant. Just give me a shield and a sword and I'll just like go head to head. He used a slingshot. That was his leverage. Like he fought a different battle with the giant. So for introverts, building a personal brand, especially with content online, is something that, yes, it takes work. Yes, you still gotta put yourself out there, and it's not comfortable for most introverts. But if you do it well, one time, then you can capitalize on that investment. So for example, we're having this conversation on a podcast and it's recorded. So we did all the effort of putting together good questions, doing research on each other. We're going to spend an hour or 30 minutes or an hour here, but this is going to live hopefully forever online. And when people search for it, I can share it. If there's some particular questions that we covered that sometimes someone asks me after that, I can share the episode. So that's kind of like what I've learned here in the US about personal branding is that, yes, extroversion is a highly valuable professional trait, but as an introvert, you have other ways to raise your voice and put yourself out there so that you can become a recognizable expert in your field. And that's what we do right now for ourselves and what we help our clients do.
Would you say it's essential?
I think everything works. I think, of course, I'm going to be biased and say yes, but I've learned that you could do cold outreach and it works in some cases. You could just do relationship based if you have a big network, and depending on the field and the area you're in, you could probably do that. So the answer would probably be yes and no. I think it's essential, and especially the way things are going online nowadays. There are a lot of one-person million, 7-figure businesses because they know how to leverage media and content to get to that point. So definitely, if you want to achieve something like that, you have to do it. You have to build a brand somehow. And I think why a lot of people don't do it is because they relate it to influencers trying to go viral, doing TikTok dances or what have you that's going viral at the moment. But it's really about putting your thoughts out there so that people can interact with you and your knowledge, even if you're not there.
Right. And I feel like there's also the misconception that websites will do the work for you. Whereas now I feel like myself, everybody I talk to, you're Googling someone far before you ever go to their website. And so if you don't see that they are out there as an expert, then are you actually going to connect even if they've been highly referred? It's kind of like, how easy do you want to make it on yourself? I feel like, and that's, like you said, personal branding can either totally do the work for you, and we'll get into some of how that can do everything. Or I feel like even if you're doing some of these other things, people still want to know, well, let me find out a little bit more before I decide if I'm even going to reach out.
Yeah, it's amazing how many times, and it was a case with you, and it's the case often that whoever books your call mentions my personal story. Oh, I saw your immigrant story was so cool. And it's because I have it on my website, and I make a call to action to it in certain instances where it makes sense. Like not everybody that lands on my website is going to want to know about me, But at some point, if they've read several articles or have come back, that's the natural next step. And it's almost always that people mention it. So, and it's out there. I don't have to introduce myself when we do the call. We can skip all of those steps. So it definitely helped do some of that business development, networking work without you necessarily being out there all the time.
Right. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that people face in developing their personal brand, and any tips you have to help overcome those?
A lot of things come to mind. We have the typical imposter syndrome. That happens a lot, right? And that's why we have typically the loudest voices, the extroverted voices, and most of the time the close to narcissist, sociopath voices out there, because they think, wow, everything I say is so good. It's a great idea. I'm not going to name names, but you probably can get an idea of where that's coming from. And there's something to learn from that, right? I don't think you have to say like, oh, that's bad. It's just like, hey, that's how the game is played. I should be confident about my ideas and how I'm able to help people. So I think that definitely stops a lot of people. I also think that the content world feels accessible. People don't realize that they're competing with professionals. Because you would not pick up a tennis racket and tell Serena Williams like, hey, let's just see what you've got. Let's play a set, right? Or I don't know, pick up some boxing gloves and challenge like an MMA fighter. Like, well, I have the gloves. I've learned a little bit. Maybe I can hang out for a minute or two in the ring with this guy. Not just him in the content world, but people don't realize it. So they go into it excited. Maybe they've had a friend who's having some success, and they think like, oh, I'm going to do it. And they don't realize that the people who are having a lot of success, sometimes they have a big team behind them. They have a process. They have templates that they use. They've learned a lot about copywriting. If it's video, maybe they have a big editing team and a scripting team. So they don't realize that there's a lot of work to make it look natural and easy. So I think that's one thing, like the expectation of, number one, what kind of results mean progress. Having a clear expectation of like, this is the typical curve and this is what you should be expecting. Probably a peak at the beginning. Everybody's going to be excited. Then you're going to go and you're going to have a dip. And that's where it's more important to keep going and have a plan of like 6 to 12 months. This is what I'm going to do. I'm committing to this. And this is the type of result that I'm expecting. That's definitely one thing that stops people. And then the other thing is the blank page, for sure. Even as an experienced writer, sometimes staring at a blank page can be a little bit intimidating. So I would definitely say leverage some templates, leverage some things that have worked for other people. There are amazing people doing a lot of that on LinkedIn, where they share either GPT prompts or some templates and things that have worked for them. And then you can just tweak them and make them your own. And of course, that's kind of like starting level. If you want to do it on your own, you can also leverage professional help, ghostwriting, and many other components. But I would say those two components of like knowing what progress looks like for you at your starting point, and then committing to a plan before you ever do the first action, because if you don't commit for the long term, you're probably going to quit, because it's going to feel a lot painful after that initial peak when you're posting things on LinkedIn and nobody's engaging. You're going to think like, hey, is nobody listening to what I've got to say? And maybe people got also a little bit of perspective, because you might get 100 impressions and you're like, wow, nobody's seeing this. And the reality is like, if 100 people listen to you in your professional message, that's a lot. That's a big classroom in any school. We just lose a little bit of perspective because it's online. But yeah, I would say those two definitely are some of the biggest that I see all the time.
I think that's great, bringing in both the expectation side of it and the plan. So in terms of a plan, is there any place, kind of a starting point, that you recommend for people who want to learn how to leverage their content to position themselves as a thought leader, as opposed to putting out content for content's sake, just a little bit of the strategic side of it?
Well, we have a good process and we're always happy to share it. Component of it is a little bit strategic and big thinking around your niche and your industry. And the other component is a little bit tactical and going deep into the keyword research. But mainly, if you're thinking strategically, you want to cover first the bottom of the funnel content. Whatever people are looking for when they're very close to making a buying decision. So let's use you as an example. You don't want to write a blog that says something like how to get started speaking or how to start building your speaking skills. It's like whoever's searching for that, they're just getting started in their speaking journey. Maybe they're not a good speaker yet, so there might not be a great fit for some of your services. But someone who is searching how to start getting paid speaking gigs, or what's the cost of working with a speaking coach pricing, or podcast booking agency pricing. Those are really good for you because whoever's searching for that, they already know that that service exists. They already know that maybe that's what they need to get their speaking career to the next level. So if you cover those topics, you're likely going to see results way faster than if you focus on something else. So that's where we usually start. And the signals are just asking the expert, hey, when people book a discovery call with you, what are the typical questions they ask at that point? And it's usually pricing, scope of work, deliverables, time. How long does it take? The whole process, what's the effort required from them and things like that. So that's on the strategic side. Then on the tactical side, you can determine if it's a bottom of the funnel keyword by looking at the cost per click through SEO research tool. So any keyword that has a high cost per click means that somebody's paying a lot of money per click for that keyword. So they're probably monetizing it. So that's a good signal that, hey, if we can get to that keyword organically, that's awesome because we're getting the traffic for free without having to pay for the ads. So definitely those two. And then along the same lines, some of the secret weapons, if you will, that we have are talking about prices and talking about your competition. Because it's so silly that people think that if you talk about your competition, you're going to lose some business as if they're not going to find it anyway. What do we do when we're looking for an expert? We search best career coach, best speaking coach, top rated speaking coach. And usually the sites that are there are sites like Clutch and those review sites. And no professional is writing that article because they're afraid that if they mention the competition, they're going to lose some clients. And it's just nonsense because people are smart. Consumers are smart. They're going to do the research. They're going to have 2 to 5 options. So why not write that article yourself? Your domain as an expert probably has better domain authority in those topics than Clutch. So they write about a bunch of different contents. But if you're a career coach, you're a speaking coach, you are a CPA, you're a lawyer, immigration lawyer. If you write that article and you truly list, hey, here are the 10 best options in this field. And let me make it easy for you. Here's who their ideal client is. Here's a case study, their typical results, their price. Like if you make it super easy for any potential consumer to find that information, it's likely that whoever's a good fit for you, it's just going to book a call with you. If you're going to put somewhere in the article like, hey, here's my 3-step guide to solve this, like if you're a CPA, I don't know, to figure out your taxes or how you can minimize your taxes. If you're a speaking coach, here are the 3 warm-up exercises that I would recommend before every podcast and speaking engagement. And you have a downloadable. And then, hey, if you're ready, you can book a call. But then you own that traffic, right? Like people are coming to your website to check that. And same with the pricing. A lot of people are afraid when they're in the selling position. They don't want to talk about pricing, but when we're in the buying position, the first thing we do is to search for pricing. Anything you're buying, right? Like you're buying a new phone, a smartphone, pricing, or you're thinking about buying a smartwatch, you usually put pricing. Same in how much is it going to cost to fix the roof or whatever the case might be. Consumers are smart. They want to have information before engaging someone because they don't want to be sold to. So again, if you write that article, and a lot of people are afraid of putting their prices out, and what I tell them is like, okay, you don't have to put your prices there, but talk about the elements that drive pricing in your industry. Give some examples. If you have other competitors who do share their pricing, share it and make it a guide, make it easy for people to, hey, for speaking coaching, you could probably pay anywhere from $50 an hour in this page that they do it, and they match you with a speaking coach, all the way up to heroic public speaking, or these other high-end ones that charge $30,000, and they have a package, and this is what they do. And usually what drives pricing up or down is A, B, and C variables. If you write that article, I guarantee, number one, that you're gonna get all the traffic. You're gonna rank number one, and then you're also gonna spend way less time talking about pricing when you have those conversations, and you're probably gonna have a better fit, because then people are gonna know, oh, I'm in this pricing range. Maybe I should go to this type of service or product versus this other one that they're offering.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that does hit on there, people want to beat around the bush, but yeah, it makes a lot of sense. That's exactly what people are going for. By the time they come to you, they're so far down the sales cycle already. They're not approaching you when they're just starting their search typically. So that makes sense. And actually, I wanted to go back to something that you talked about a little early on, how you went from kind of not doing a lot of engagement to going all out. And you did get burned out, but what helped you with the burnout? So if people think, okay, this is making sense. This sounds like something that I should focus on, but I really don't want to because that sounds so overwhelming. What tips do you have for avoiding burnout, but still doing this in a way that's going to provide results?
I think you have to check in with yourself and understand if it's giving you energy or taking energy away from you, and then making sure you balance those out. And also pick the type of engaging that works for you. So in my case, I love one-on-one conversations. I could probably do what we're doing for 3 hours and leave energized. If we get into the weeds of how to build a personal brand, is specific, if you're like, hey, let's go deep into the keyword research, and like I could talk days about business and personal branding and strategy and leave energized. Versus if I go to a big networking event, that's really done for me. So that's number one, like identifying in which areas is it that I get energy or I get depleted, but making sure that you do push yourself, because it's not like I could easily not push myself to have one-on-one conversations and be good. You definitely need to push yourself. And then the other one is that the activity needs to be energizing in some way. So for example, for a while, I saw a lot of people were doing outreach on LinkedIn, and I thought, well, let me not be closed-minded. Let me just try it and see if it works. And it definitely works, but I was scheduling maybe 5 to 8 short calls per week, and it was exhausting. If you never really get to deep topics, it's just like literally small talk. You don't get deep, and then you kind of like forget. It's very salesy. And I said, I do not like this. This does not energize me versus writing content. Like I get excited about, I'm going to write these 5 pieces of content for this week on LinkedIn. I wonder which one it's going to do better. and I'm like, I schedule it and I'm looking forward at the end of the week. Let me go back and see the analytics. Oh, this worked because of that. Oh, wow, I was not expecting this one to really hit this nerve, but it did. So I get excited, and that's energizing. So I would say those two things are very important. Find what works for you, what energizes you, while at the same time, not just retreating to your comfort zone. Like, make sure that you do some things that are expanding your comfort with putting yourself out there.
Right. Experimenting, because you never know until you try it. And when it comes to building out your personal brand and your personal brand stories, what approach do you have as a starting point for people? Where do they begin with their story? What should they tell? What shouldn't they tell? And how do they go about that?
That's a great point, because a lot of people tend to think that their story is not important. They only focus on the value that they can provide. But most of the time, sharing your story can really help you build affinity with whoever really is going to connect with you. But there are several things that I usually mention. There's many different methodologies on how to build your story and your bio. There's a STAR method that a lot of career coaches recommend. I've done a lot of reading and working on fiction and writing short stories and scenes. So I like to use those principles to write the stories. They're very similar to the STAR method, but what they change is that they have inciting incident, turning point, progressive complication, crisis, climax, and resolution. And the inciting incident is very important because it's something that happens externally to the protagonist. And that's a big mistake that a lot of people make. We connect when we're reading a story, when we're reading a book, whether it is an action book, sci-fi book, romance novel, whatever it might be. What kicks off the story is something that happens to the protagonist externally. And that takes their own world, right? Like Bilbo does not decide to, hey, let me just go to the mountain and find a ring, and I'm going to fight the evil forces of Middle Earth. No, Gandalf comes to him and unannounced, and he brings all the elves, right? Same with kind of like Harry Potter or any story. The inciting incident, it's always something externally. So I tell people, start the story with that, right? So I start my story with like, this was going on in Venezuela, and that's what kicked me into this journey. Because if you don't, people are not going to identify with you because they feel you're in control. Life is difficult, and we want to see protagonists struggle so that we can identify with them, because we also feel like life is happening to us, and sometimes it's very challenging and difficult. So that's something big that I recommend people. Did you have to switch majors? Did something big happen at the beginning of your career? Did you get laid off? What was that catalyst that made you go into your hero's journey? That's very important to start the story. And of course, we want to see more struggles. We want to see you as a protagonist going through some difficulties, not really figuring out right away, which nobody usually does. And then the typical, we need to see a crisis. It needs to be a difficult decision that you made. Usually it's either best bad choice. So, hey, do we let go of half of our workforce, or do we risk bankruptcy because we don't have the cash flow and meet our financial commitments, for example? That's a best bad choice. Both are really bad, but you got to make a decision. Or irreconcilable goods. Hey, at one point in my career, I had the opportunity to either stay in the company that I was working at and just keep building this corporate career in a Fortune 500 company, or be a leader in a small startup that nobody knew, but I was just going to develop a different skill set. I like both of those choices sound really good, either building a Fortune 500 career or a startup, but those are irreconcilable goods because you have to decide as well, whatever you decide, it's going to be really difficult to switch to the other side at some point. So you definitely want that with your crisis. You want to make sure that it was a difficult choice, and then you want to show, hey, and this was the decision I made, and this is kind of like the result or the consequences. So I like that framework because it goes a little bit deeper than the STAR method into the story components that are the things that really pull us in when we see the good TV shows that get us to binge watch, or those movies that, even though they're super long, we can't go anywhere because we're hooked by the story. Those are the 5 commandments that I like to use when building someone's bio, and that I recommend.
I love that. I think it's relatable, it's entertaining, and it keeps people hooked, and you're being very vulnerable. So that, like you said, kind of builds the affinity. So I love that. And I love the examples that you...
Go ahead.
I love Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter as well. So I like the examples.
Awesome. Yeah. And the other thing is you got to test it. I think a lot of people think that writers just sit down and write something and it's great right away. And an example I like to use is a Jerry Seinfeld example that a lot of people don't know, but in this, it's with him and every comedian, they test the material before doing the specials. So what they usually do is they write the joke, they test it out, and they go to small comedy clubs unannounced so that nobody knows they're going to be there. And they test the material before going to the special because they want to know, hey, what about this joke? Is it landing with this demographic, with that demographic? What about the timing? What about the order in which I'm telling these jokes? Which one builds up? Should I move this one to the beginning? So they do all that testing before doing the special. So what I tell people is, with your personal branding statement and your personal branding stories, you should have several. You should be able to tell your story quickly in a minute or less, or if you have time like we have right now, you should be able to expand and get into the details. But you definitely want to practice, especially in live audiences, and see their reactions. Are they nodding? Are they asking questions? Are they leaning forward? Are they asking questions at the end? Are people coming to you at the end of your workshop or talk and asking more questions? Then that's a sign, okay, you're really connecting with these people. You're really engaging. If that's not the case, then, you got to work on it and maybe add some jokes or some dramatic moments, work with your timing or delivery so that it can be an engaging story for everyone else.
Yeah, I think that's so important. It's one thing to extract the information from your head and get it on paper, but you want to make sure that your audience is connecting with it the way that you want and need them to be effective. So again, that experimenting and moving things around. I love the Jerry Seinfeld example because it's so true. We know comedians have always done that, and why, and that's so such a perfect way for them to get instant feedback on something. And thanks to social media, we can get instant feedback on things as well. So correct. Yeah. You're mentioning personal statements as well, personal brand statements. So can you differentiate between personal brand stories and personal brand statements, and a little bit about what you recommend for personal brand statements?
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite topics. So one of the questions that most people are afraid of, and it happens a lot in professional setting, in real life, is the what do you do question. Everybody hates that question. Or let's go around and share a little bit about ourselves, and everybody gets nervous. I know I do, even though I know my stories, you always get sometimes nervous, maybe excitement. Also, the sensations in the body are usually the same, and they teach athletes to not confuse them and know that it's excitement because you're about to perform. But you'd be surprised of how many people, even very successful people, executives, people who are very sharp, that when they get asked that question, they fumble it and they just go in different directions or don't really think about what do I need to say in this audience to build trust. That's really what you want to do professionally in every conversation. how do I build trust so that these people know that they can rely on me for this particular challenges or problems or situations? So with the personal branding statement, I tell people, you have to practice it. And you have to know, and you have to think about, what is it that I want to communicate in every setting? We're in a board meeting, we're going around, what do I need? What's important for these people to know about me and my story so that they can connect with me? Maybe something personal and something professional. Same with you introducing yourself, whether it's on a podcast or you're doing a speaking engagement. You have to think about, what is it that I need to tell in that moment so that I can build trust really quick and they can connect with me. Part of that could be a short bio that you put together and you give it to someone else to introduce you. Also, what is it that you say at the very beginning? I recommend people to rehearse that and know it by heart, but then be able to have several statements that you can adapt them to the situation, because it's different if you are at a networking event with a lot of pure professionals who know exactly what you do, and then you can just go deep into, hey, I focus on helping this kind of professionals do X, Y, and Z, versus if you're with your family and Thanksgiving or Christmas and someone's asking, hey, what is it that you do? I know you work in PR. Is it a newspaper article? And then you can have a story that's a little bit more broad for people to remember, because you never know if they have a colleague or someone who needs your services, and you need to make sure that whatever story you're telling, whatever your statement is for that person, is going to be something memorable. So definitely work on your personal branding statement. It should be something that you can say on your slip so that you can focus on the delivery and reading whoever you're saying it to see if it's really connecting or not. And then, of course, you cannot go introducing yourself all the time, because at some point you're going to be in circles where you know everybody. But that's when you start working on your personal branding stories. And for a lot of people, that might feel fake. Why would I spend time rehearsing my personal branding stories? And what most people don't know is that anyone you see out there on a podcast that is a great speaker, a great storyteller, they've usually rehearsed those stories. And it's not fake. It's a service. It's in service of the audience. It's in service of making sure that what I'm saying, right? If you're speaking in front of an audience of 100 people, that's 100 hours of professional time that you're taking. So whatever you're saying needs to be very valuable, and you need to make sure that it's going to connect with them. So I recommend that people write their stories, keep a journal collecting their stories, because it usually happens that you are either invited to a podcast, and at that point you think, oh, I should have stories, or you are doing an interview, and at that point you think, well, I should have some things to share during that time, but you can't remember because either you didn't keep track of the numbers or KPIs or things you want to share. So I tell people, if you want to be a good storyteller, you first need to become a good collector of stories. So somehow have a journal, in a note app or somewhere, anytime something that you think it's a highlight that you could share, anytime you go through a difficult situation, difficult project, and you're able to solve it, good. That's a story. Write it down. What are the numbers? What was the transformation? So that later on you can work with that. Definitely practicing. And I tell people now with digital tools, it's so easy. It's something that I usually tell the students when we're working on their podcast, on their stock pitches, is to set up a Zoom call on your own, record it, you doing your presentation, and then you're going to listen to it, or you're going to review it in 3 different ways. Number 1, you're going to see it without any sound. You're still engaging even without the sound. When you're looking at yourself speak, are you thinking, wow, I really need to know what this person is saying, because it looks so engaging. It looks so animated and charismatic. If not, then definitely you need to work on that. In your tonality, your movement, how you're using your body. Then the second time, you're going to listen to it, only the sound and no visuals. Is your vocal image engaging? Are you monotone and boring? Or are you finishing always with a question and all just statements and like this? Maybe it's not that good, right? That's the second test. Just listen to it. Is it engaging? Do you need to work on something? And then the third would be to read the transcript and see if you have a lot of filler work. And then you know you need to work on those. But it's a lot of work. That's why most people don't do it. That's why the people who do stand out. And those are the people most of the time who are dominating social media. But that's what I would recommend. Definitely keep a notepad so that you can have little notes of good stories that you want to tell. At some point, I don't know, once a quarter, make sure that you're outlining those or scripting those, thinking through the 5 commandments that we talked about. Okay, what's the inciting incident for this story? The progressive complication, crisis, climax, resolution, and then make sure that you're looking for opportunities. They should be exciting. Like when I have a new story, whether I'm going to use it in a presentation or at an event, I'm excited. I'm like, wow, let me see how this is going to land. And the beauty is that once you have several in your repertoire, you can just rely on those. If those are working well for you, you don't need to build anything else. You can just refresh those a little bit when you're going to events or different situations, and then add anything new if you need. But it's definitely a lot of work. It's not easy, but it's absolutely worth it.
Yes, for sure. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people, it is a lot of work. It can feel daunting, but it makes an enormous difference. Back to what you were saying about the personal brand statements, is there a general rule for the length of personal brand statement? You know, how long it should take to speak, whether that's written or you're speaking it?
You probably want to have different versions. I would definitely peg the character limit on LinkedIn and the different social media profiles so that you craft one for each. Then same on your website. It should be something short that when people ask you, what do, you don't have to ramble for a long time. So in my case, is I help professionals clearly communicate their value so they can attract growth opportunities and become the go-to experts in their niche. Of course, there's a lot more to that, but that's kind of like, if I say that and I'm in front of someone who wants to do that, they're probably going to ask like, oh, how do you do that? And then I can keep unpacking the story. But it should definitely be something that the shortest one should be something that fits on any social media profile so that you can have it out there. And especially on LinkedIn, because a lot of people don't know this, but your headline follows everywhere on LinkedIn. So when you're posting on LinkedIn, your photo is there, your name is there, and the first part of your headline is there. Same when you're commenting on someone's post, your headline is there. So that's where your personal branding statement should be. And the most engaging part should be at the beginning, so that if anyone is in your ideal client profile demographic, when they see that, they want to visit your profile, kind of like get to know you a little bit more. And that's when you, in the about section, you have your story, and in the feature section, maybe you have your downloadable or the educational component that you have, so that they can get to know you. And it's all kind of like the headline is hooking you to visit the profile. The background of the profile is hooking you to check the feature section. And just like everything is kind of like a leaving little crumbles and guiding people to the next step in the journey. But there are many ways, going back to your point about the personal branding statement, I think there are many. We have examples on our website of something very short when people are super known. Let's say someone like Gary Vee, I think his personal brand statement now, it's like, I'm an entrepreneur that builds businesses. And at this point, a lot of people know who he is, versus if you're just getting started and a lot of people know you, maybe you need something more specific, like, I am a CPA that helps small businesses below $2 million save at least $20,000 in tax every year. So it's like, oh, super specific. Great. That's what gets you known in that space, and you can build from that. But there are many templates. There are many different ways. There are many different theories. But in essence, you want to communicate what you do, who you help, and how you help them, and the type of results you can expect, so that in the least amount of time, you can hook people if they're your ideal audience.
I think that is so important. And for everyone who's listening, we are going to have in the show notes, he has some great personal brand statement examples. And so if you're curious about where do I even start, what could that look like for someone like me, then this will be a great starting point for you to take a look at as you work on developing or maybe refining yours. So Alejandro, we've covered a lot. Is there anything we haven't covered that you want to leave listeners with?
Some personal branding statements, personal branding stories, cover the secret weapons. I would say just explore. There's a lot that can be done by going all in on your personal brand. Do the internal work of getting to know yourself and what really works. But with the growth of the internet and media and content, I feel like this has allowed a lot of people who are career-oriented, but also want to have a life. I think for a while, it was a decision of either or. You're either career-oriented and you're going to build a great career, but you're not going to have a life. Like, you're not going to have time to go to the gym or play sports in a league with your friends or have a hobby. It's like, no, only the career, that's what you're allowed to do. Versus not, or just going like, hey, I'm not going to have a great career, but I'm going to have time to be with my kids, maybe be their little league coach or something like that. And I feel like now, because of content and media and the digital tools that we have at our disposal, more and more people can make the decision of doing the and option, which is, yes, I'm going to build a great career. I'm going to build a great business. And I'm also going to have work-life balance. I'm going to have time to dedicate to my family and the other components outside of my career that I think are important. So it's definitely not going to happen overnight. You're going to have to make a conscious investment in building either your content creation skills and being comfortable with being out there. But if you do, I would say in 2 to 3 years, your life could be totally different in just by embracing it and seeing how your business can scale beyond where you are right now.
So great. Well, thank you so much, Alejandro. I really appreciate all of your tips and insights today. Hope everybody enjoyed listening, and we'll see you next time. Now is the time to start your podcast. Let my team help you every step of the way. Podcasts offer what other marketing channels can't. Attention. 80% of podcast listeners listen to the entire episode, and more than 50% consider buying from brands they discover there. Big business is investing billions because of the incredible ROI. Start yours now to get more leads, opportunities, and strengthen your brand for years to come. Email hello@christiebilbrey.com to find out if this is right for you.